testimony before Congress. President Trump taps a former attorney general to once again head up the Justice Department. And the arrest of a high-profile technology executive threatens to derail a potential trade deal with China. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being with us. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and this is Sunday Morning Futures. Former FBI Director Jim Comey is questioned for hours Friday, but on numerous occasions, he just could not recall any key details about unverified information that sparked a probe of the Trump campaign. We will show you the transcript coming up. Get reaction as well in an exclusive interview with the likely next chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Lindsey Graham is with me this morning. Plus, Senator Graham on a potentially heated confirmation battle shaping up over President Trump's choice to be the next Attorney General. Then what will Republicans get done after Democrats take control of the House? I'll ask the upcoming House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, in my exclusive interview coming up. Plus, the White House trade advisor Peter Navarro joins me to discuss the latest trade talks with China, the arrest of the technology giant Huawei CFO, testing both sides, and also this market reaction over worries on economic growth. Plus, the White House Chief of Staff is out. All that and more as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. And we begin this morning with President Trump saying that he intends to nominate William Barr as his next Attorney General. My first guest this morning has pledged to do everything in his power to make sure Barr is confirmed. Joining me right now is Republican Senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. He sits on the Senate Judiciary, Armed Services, and Budget Committees. And Senator, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What is the likelihood that William Barr gets confirmed as the next AG, sir?
Unless there's something really strange, 100%. He's been confirmed 3 times. He's been the former Attorney General for Bush 41, the Deputy Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Division, and each time he was confirmed by voice vote. There's never been a recorded vote because he's that highly qualified.
Well, I mean, at this point, what do we know about William Barr other than that he was the AG for H.W. Bush and also his thoughts on the Mueller probe? I mean, what do you think his first point of his agenda will be, Senator, given the fact that this Mueller probe has been going on for 2 years and most people don't really understand where Robert Mueller is going?
Well, I hope the Mueller probe is over by the time it gets confirmed. This has been going on for 2 years. I hope they'll wrap this thing up. But one of the first questions we'll be asked of him, will you support Mr. Mueller's ability to complete the probe? And I'm sure he'll say yes. But the idea of looking into the 2016 election completely makes sense to me. You're going to talk to me in a minute about the FISA warrant process used in 2016 against Carter Page and other people based on a dossier paid for by the Democratic Party, prepared by a foreign agent that's completely, to this day, still unverified. We're going to look into everything that happened in 2016, not just Trump, if I'm chairman.
Well, let's talk a bit about that, because, of course, we know that we had that high-profile testimony on Friday of Jim Comey in front of the House Judiciary as well as the Oversight Committees. And Comey used the words, "I don't remember," 72 times. He said, "I don't know," 167 times. "I don't recall," another 8 times. So it doesn't sound like he gave all that much information. What's your reaction to the Comey testimony?
Well, my biggest reaction was he made a statement after he testified that the FISA warrant process, basically to look into that would be sort of a joke. I don't think it's a joke at all that a warrant was issued based on a document paid for by a political party, prepared by a foreign agent that's unverified, to basically surveil a member of a presidential campaign. That's not funny to me. I want to know how that happened and the role he played. So there's a lot to look at when it comes to FISA oversight, and I intend to do that really early on.
So will there be accountability? I mean, some of the comments in terms of what Comey admitted, he talked about the unverified information submitted to the FISA court. Congressman Ratcliffe said, "Do you recall that on numerous occasions you, in your capacity as the FBI director, referred to the Steele dossier as salacious and unverified?" Mr. Comey says, "Yes, I don't know that. I was referring to all of it." Mr. Ratcliffe says, But again, your characterization of it was that it was unverified, even though you had it verified to the court. Mr. Comey says, what I understand by verified is we then try to replicate the source information so that it becomes FBI investigation and our conclusions rather than a reliable source. That's what I understand it, the difference to be. And that work was not completed by the time I left in May 17. So he basically admits here then, Senator, that yes, they brought information to the FISA court that was unverified, and they ended up getting a wiretap warrant to spy on a member of the Trump campaign. Carter Page.
Well, I hope that bothers people. It certainly bothers me. Here's the question that I'm going to ask. To this day, is the dossier verified? Are the allegations in that dossier, have they been verified to this day? It's my understanding they have not. And this was the source of the warrant, and it was renewed 4 times. And you got the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein involved in the renewal process. How could a document prepared by a foreign agent, paid for by the Democratic Party and the Clinton campaign, make it so far through the legal process and nobody threw a flag?
Right.
That bothers me greatly. What is a counterintelligence investigation versus a criminal investigation? And what are the rules of surveilling a campaign of a major party nominee? All this is very important. Bill Barr should make it through, overwhelmingly should be confirmed, unless politics regarding Trump have completely destroyed the Senate. I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know this, that President Trump nominated the most qualified person available to him. This man has been confirmed 3 times by a voice vote. And when it comes to how this committee will look at 2016, we're going to look at everything, including the FISA warrant process.
So just to be clear, you are going to be looking at everything, and we're expecting you to be the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
You know, I hope so. I think that's the plan. We'll see next year.
All right. Let me move on and ask you a bit about the CIA information of Mr. Khashoggi, Jamal Khashoggi's murder. We know what the CIA has been saying, and it's not exactly in step with what the administration has been saying in terms of whether or not the Crown Prince ordered this hit. Your reaction to what you heard from the CIA, sir?
It's the most brilliant briefing I've ever received in my time in Congress. You had 2 analysts that walked us through the MBS, the Crown Prince's focus on Mr. Khashoggi for about 2 years. This operation was very sophisticated. The person in charge of executing the operation is MBS's right-hand man. There is no doubt by any senator who received this briefing that MBS was complicit in the murder of Mr. Khashoggi. It's not just this dissident he's gone after. He's gone after others, renditions. People have been captured in other countries, brought back to Saudi Arabia because they've been critics in these countries. He put the Lebanese prime minister under house arrest in the most bizarre episode I've seen in 20 years.
But what are you going to do about it?
I mean, and here's my take.
Yeah, what are you going to do about it?
We're going to label him MBS. Okay. Well, we're going to label him complicit. We're going to have a vote in the Senate saying that MBS was complicit in the murder of Mr. Khashoggi. I'm never going to support any more arms sales to Saudi Arabia. MBS, the Crown Prince, is a wrecking ball. I think the guy's crazy. Who in their right mind would lure somebody to a consulate in Turkey and have them killed in such a brutal manner, believing you could get away with it? So my concern is, under this guy's leadership, if we transfer weapons to Saudi Arabia, he'll turn around and give it to the Russians and the Chinese. There's a huge backlash growing in a bipartisan manner against our relationship with Saudi Arabia as long as MBS is the face of it. It's a strategically important relationship, but not at all cost.
All right. Well, we'll have to watch that because we know Iran is the real bad actor in the neighborhood, and the U.S. was counting on the Saudis to be unified against the terrorists out of Iran.
I'm not. Okay. Let me put it this way. I want to be very blunt with you. If it weren't for the United States, they'd be speaking Farsi in about a week in Saudi Arabia. Their military can't fight out of a paper bag. They give us 9% of our oil imports. We need them a lot less than they need us. So I don't buy this idea. You've got to hook up to a murderous regime, a thug like MBS to protect America from Iran. Quite the opposite. I think by hooking up with him, we hurt our ability to govern the region.
All right. Well, we'll be watching that. Let me turn over to the agenda in 2019, because we know Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are going to be meeting with the president on Tuesday to talk about the spending bill and the border wall funding. Why can't the Senate get on board with the president's border wall funding, sir?
Listen to this. The incoming Speaker of the House has said building a wall along our southern border is immoral. What are you looking at, Nancy Pelosi? Look at the caravan. Look at the charge against the border. Look at the caravans that are to come. Look at the holes in our border security. So here's the problem. You got the Democratic leader to be in the House calling border security a wall component immoral. If I'm President Trump, Tuesday, I would tell Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer that we're going to build a wall where it makes sense. If I were the president, I would dig in and not give in on additional wall funding. I'd want the whole $5 billion, because the caravan is a game changer. 1.6 is available to the president. He wants 5. And after the caravan, if you don't see the need for additional border security, you're just not paying much attention. So, Mr. President, dig in, do not give in when it comes to the wall.
But isn't it the Senate who's stopping this? I mean, every time we ask congressmen, they say it's passed. We've got the money in the House. It's the Senate.
Well, you're going to have the Speaker of the House who will be in charge next year. What about next year? So here's what's happening in the Senate. We need 60 votes to get $5 billion. If I were the president, I would tell the Democrats, I want $5 billion for wall security, because for border security, including a wall, because we need it from the threats we're facing, this caravan and others to follow. And I'd put DACA on the table. There's 700,000 young people who came here on the average age of 6, have got no place to go. They're in the DACA program. If I were the president, I'd say, I want 2 years of wall funding, and I'll give legal status to the DACA recipients. That's a good deal for the country. And let's just see what happens. But the president is in a good spot here. He needs to dig in and not give in when it comes to wall funding, and put DACA on the table and see what Nancy Pelosi says then.
I believe Nancy Pelosi said she doesn't want anything attached to DACA, but we'll see. We're going to have Congressman Kevin McCarthy coming up, who will soon be the minority leader, and we'll ask him about that as well. But, Senator, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Lindsey Graham joining us there. We're going to take a look at this wild stock market recently, the latest from inside the White House, as Chief of Staff John Kelly is preparing to leave the administration. White House National Trade Council Director Peter Navarro talks trade, tariffs, and John Kelly when we come back. Follow me on Twitter at Maria Bartiromo, at Sunday Futures. Let us know what you'd like to see on the program. Stay with us as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures.
John Kelly will be leaving at the end of the year. We'll be announcing who will be taking John's place. It might be on an interim basis. I'll be announcing that over the next day or two. But John will be leaving at the end of the year.
That's President Trump announcing his chief of staff, John Kelly's imminent departure, bringing an end to his 17-month-long tenure in the Trump administration. Let's bring in Peter Navarro. He is the White House National Trade Council Director. And, Peter, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Good morning, Maria.
I want to talk a lot about trade and tariffs and certainly the situation with China. But first, let me ask you about John Kelly. How does that change your agenda or change how you are dealing with the president now that he is looking for a new chief of staff?
Let me say I had the privilege of going to the staff dinner with the First Lady and the President on Friday night. The President had nothing but warm words to say to John Kelly. He served with honor and dignity while he's been at the White House, and before that when he was in uniform. We wish him well. The tradition of the Trump administration over the 2 years I've been there is that people come and go. Every time we get a change, the change is good. It doesn't mean it's for the better. And I wish the chief well, and we're going to just move forward the way we've been moving forward. You have to remember, it's the president who's the leader and the chief here.
Right. And we'll be watching to see who he names next as his chief of staff. In the meantime, Peter, look at these markets. We had another wild week for the stock market, down 600 points one day, down 500 the next day. Now we are looking at a decline year to date, with the Dow down in negative territory, S&P down in negative territory for 2018 on worries over trade, tariffs, higher interest rates. We all know that tariffs were your idea. People are worried that these higher tariffs are cutting into companies' ability to grow because input costs are going higher. That's crushing profit margins and hurting the stock market. So what are you going to do about it?
So, first of all, I think that's a false narrative in terms of the impact of the tariffs on the stock market. My view is that this is strictly an interest rate effect. I think the Fed went too far, too fast, and what we saw basically was a little asset reallocation from the stock to the bond market. We've had some impact on the housing market. In terms of the dollar, it's too strong now, and that's exacerbated our trade deficit. But this is a normal adjustment. To me, it's not even a correction. You have to remember where we started from back on Election Day. We've come thousands and thousands and thousands of points forward. And on the day after election, Maria, I predicted that we would go to 25,000 on the Dow. A lot of people laughed at me at the time.
I predicted it as well, Peter. I mean, I know that the president's business-friendly policies have been great for the market and the economy, by the way. We saw 4.2% economic growth in the second quarter. But now we're dealing with some big issues. China, for example. How does the arrest of the CFO of Huawei implicate or change this truce in terms of talks between the U.S. and China?
On the outside, it looks like a complication, but these two events are independent. The Justice Department is moving forward on that. We'll see how that goes. I think the most important thing is at the dinner we had in Argentina, the president of our great nation and the president of China have very good chemistry together. The president of China spent 45 minutes providing a detailed plan to address the various structural issues facing our two nations. And you know what they are, Maria. It's the forced technology transfer. It's the intellectual property theft. It's the currency manipulation. It's the state-owned enterprises that basically run around the world with massive subsidies. These have to be addressed. And so I'm confident that with Bob Lighthizer in the lead and a good team behind him, that by March 1st, the Chinese will deliver on their promise to have concrete, verifiable actions with concrete, verifiable results. And we should be optimistic. But the markets shouldn't pin their hopes on that, because that's not what this is all about. We have a tremendously strong economy. Every indicator is pointing up. We're bullish. The China trade is a small part of our overall economic growth and world trade. And I think what we need to do is focus on the structural adjustments that are occurring here in this economy under the leadership of the best presidents we've had in modern history.
Yeah, but everyone's worried about growth because of these tariffs. Is there any reason to believe the tariffs on steel and aluminum go away over the near term?
So, Maria, look, there's a lot of false narratives out there where they're trying to beat back the tariffs, but the tariffs have been growth-inducing and investment-inducing, productivity-inducing, and steel and aluminum is the poster child. Hang on.
Stay with us. We're going to take a short break and come back to this. Stay with us. Right now, and Peter, you were in the middle of a thought in terms of what the impact of this market is. I mean, could this be a cycle where it's just negative, where the market drops and that impacts and cuts into economic growth, all of the things that you're talking about that were so great about this economy?
Certainly not, Maria. You know that the market is simply a leading indicator of the economy, and the economy is just rock solid. Business optimism, consumer confidence, ISM manufacturing index, productivity up, wages up, unemployment at record lows. And the best part of the Trump economy is that the people at the lower end of the income stream, the Trump voters who work with their hands, they're the ones who are benefiting the most from the falling unemployment and the rising wages. So this is look, this is an adjustment. It's not even a correction. The economy's rock solid. We're moving forward. Importantly, the Federal Reserve has announced that it's no longer going to be announcing interest rates far in advance. It's going to look at the data instead and make reasoned choices. And the beauty of the Trump economy, Maria, is that all of the structural changes that the president is putting in, from corporate tax cuts to deregulation, that allows growth-inducing, deflationary growth, stimulates investment, productivity, and wages. That can go on for a long time, and it will go on for a long time, and the markets are going to reflect that. So you know how Wall Street loves to wring their hands and gets all upset, and the program traders love it.
Peter,
strong economy, strong stock market.
Do you really think that the Chinese are going to admit that they've been stealing and they're going to stop it in the next 90 days? Real quick.
At the dinner in Argentina, there was an acknowledgement of the practices that they engage in, and they said they would stop doing it.
So they acknowledged it.
I mean, look, yes, and you and I mean, look, we've looked at this for years. We know that China has unfortunately never honored a single major commitment it's made going back to the World Trade Organization entry, and in 2015 promising to stop the cyber intrusions into our businesses. They just keep doing that stuff. But this is different. This president, Donald J. Trump, they respect him, they fear him, and if anybody can get a deal, it's going to be President Donald J. Trump with Ambassador Robert Lighthizer.
All right, we will leave it there. Peter, it's great to see you. Thanks so much.
Take care, Maria.
Peter Navarro at the White House. Meanwhile, a partial government shutdown averted for now after President Trump signed a 2-week extension of current federal funding. Now the stage is set for a high-stakes meeting between the president and top Democrat leaders on Tuesday of this upcoming week as border wall funding remains the major sticking point. Joining me right now in an exclusive interview is the House Majority Leader, Kevin McCarthy. Congressman, it's great to see you.
Oh, great to have me back.
Thanks so much for joining us. So what about this continuing resolution and the funding? Is this all about getting the money for the president's border wall? Is that where this fight is about?
Well, remember where we are. You only had a continuing resolution because of the unfortunate passing of President Bush. So we were supposed to finish all of our work, and we've done 75% of all government funding. It's just these 7 appropriation bills that need to be done. And the only reason why they're not, because it takes 60 votes in the Senate. Now, the challenge here is we know the problem with border security. We need our borders strong secure, especially with the caravan and others.
Right.
In the House version, we have $5 billion. The Senate version has 1.6. And what the president's saying is, I want a deal. That's why Schumer has a process in this, but he's going to have Schumer come in. Now, Nancy Pelosi is in a different position. She's having a battle to become speaker.
Right.
You have to have 218 votes on the floor. So that's January. But we have to get this all done in the next 2 weeks. You know the type of new members she has coming in. They're much more socialist, progressive, where they don't go to her office to visit her. They go to her office to join in the protests. So she has a challenge that she doesn't want to vote for anything.
She doesn't want anything done.
No, but we
she
need
wants
to
to
get
be
this
speaker.
done. Exactly. So it's more her personal politics than putting the American public first.
What about this meeting on Tuesday? What comes out of it?
Well, I'm hopeful agreement comes out of it. Exactly what the president, the art of the deal, what he's looking for. He wants an agreement. But remember what happened last time we got here when Schumer shut the government down.
Yeah. Then we saw the crocodile tears.
Oh, yes. He threw a big argument that he wanted just his way. This is a place where we can find common ground. The president, I wanted to fully fund it at $25 billion. The president said, give me $5 billion. That's a compromise. I think from a standpoint of what we see happening along the border is a real challenge. We need border security.
She says she's not going to do it, Nancy Pelosi, under any circumstances. So where are we once your next deadline comes, the 21st?
We've got 2 more weeks.
Partial government shutdown?
Well, yes, because we funded 75% of the government. This is not something the president wants to do. The president wants to get to an agreement, solve the border, fund the 25% rest of the government, and let's move forward on places that we can agree and keep moving this country in the right direction.
Let me ask you about another issue that's been real important to you, and that is these technology companies out there. Bigger than we've ever seen, more powerful than we've ever seen. There have been breaches. There's obviously speculation that they're censoring conservative conversation. You've got the CEO of Google coming in to testify. What are you looking to get out of that?
Well, this is something you have, too, that we've looked at this for quite some time because technology affects so much of our life. 2/3 of every adult American gets their news from the internet.
That's incredible. Yeah.
But there's no other company that has a greater control over the internet on searches than Google. And Google has not been coming to any of our hearings, whereas Twitter, Facebook, and others. 90% of all internet searches goes through Google.
That's a monopoly.
This is an argument. Competitiveness, bias. We know the story, what they did to the California Republican Party before the primary, calling our ideology Nazism.
Yeah.
We looked at what happened in that video right after the election when President Trump won, how depressed they were, and then they gave that silent donation trying to influence. And think about, I give Google credit in 2010 when they pulled out of China what China was asking them to do in their searches. But now there's talk of them coming back, this dragonfly. But then Google pulled out of working with the Armed Forces of America because they disagreed with the AI platform which our armed services want.
And we know that China has a national system, whereas everybody gets a score.
Everybody gets a score.
They're spying on you, and at the end of the year, you get a score, and if they don't like the way you behaved, if you smoked cigarettes, if you whatever it is, you may not be able to get a train ticket. You might not be able able to get on the plane, whatever it is. And is Google helping China with that?
Well, these are the questions we have to, and I give Sundar credit. Their CEO came in to see me after I put out a tweet. He promised he would come to a hearing.
Yeah, but he blew it off for so many times before that, right?
To the Senate and others he did, but to myself he promised, and he's coming. We postponed it a week because of the president's death. But these are questions have to be answered. Then that's about China, but what about the privacy of Americans? How long do they keep those searches that are supposed to be private that you go through? How do you get what is you doing with the data that you're finding? Because they know almost everything about us.
These are media companies now. Let's face it, Congressman. Are you going to see different legislation overseeing these companies, since they're media companies and now they didn't think they were media companies just a year ago? And
they don't get treated the same way.
Right, exactly.
They get treated differently, where they get to almost self-police. And let's see, what have they been doing to that process? And what is the bias? I know it's an algorithm, but a human rights is algorithm. If you go into Google and you search something, they give you the 4 queries before you go through. If you put something negative there, you'll pick on that. It's 95% of people drop off by the time they go to the second page of Google where your search comes up. And when they put up news, they're beginning to put up opinions that are news.
Are we going to see a regulation? Are we going to see a bill come to the floor about bigger power?
This is why we're having the hearings.
Okay.
What do we need to protect? What do we need to stop the bias? What do we need for competition?
What else is on your agenda going into 2019? Give us your agenda real quick.
Well, we have to finish off this. We've got to get the farm bill done. We've got to get the funding done. We've got to have border security. I'm a person that believes in legal immigration, and our immigration system is broken, and I'd like to solve that problem.
Working with the Democrats in 2019, it's going to be what they say is going to be the agenda, no?
Now, let's not give the Democrats more power than they have. The Republicans still control the Senate, and President Trump is still in office and needs to sign the bill.
True.
The Democrats that got elected did not get elected on an agenda. The only thing they talked about are investigations in the process.
Yeah.
And I think America is too great for such a small idea.
Congressman, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Kevin McCarthy. We'll be right back.
I'm Chris Wallace. The White House Chief of Staff is out. Prosecutors tie President Trump closer to Russian interference and other crimes. And doubts about that U.S.-China trade deal rattle Wall Street.
Everybody in Washington now agrees that China is a bad actor doing bad things.
We'll discuss trade talks, the arrest of a top Chinese executive, and what it means for the U.S. economy, with one of the president's top advisors, Larry Kudlow. Then, a week of dramatic revelations in Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. What do the court filings show, and what does it mean for the president?
I think it's all turning around very nicely. There's absolutely no collusion, which is very important.
Senator Angus King, a key member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, joins us. Plus,
we do not want to let a Trump temper tantrum govern our policies or cause the shutdown of the government.
I don't think the president's bluffing.
We'll ask our Sunday panel if a government shutdown over President Trump's border wall is now unavoidable. And our Power Player of the Week.
The pilot said, we have to go. Tom, you stay here, you die. You join Jesse.
One American hero's act of devotion you'll never forget.
Tom shouted at the cockpit. He said, Jesse, we'll be back for you somehow, someday.
All right now on Fox News Sunday. And hello again from Fox News in Washington. The Trump administration is getting a makeover. On his way to the Army-Navy game yesterday, the president announced Chief of Staff John Kelly will leave by the end of the year. Meanwhile, uncertainty over the U.S.-China trade deal is casting a shadow over an economy that has been a bright spot for the administration. Joining us now, President Trump's top White House economic advisor, Larry Kudlow. Larry, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
In July, just a couple of months ago, President Trump said that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly would remain on the job through 2020. Now he says that Kelly is out as one of the top few White House staffers. What happened?
Well, look, it's been a long 2 years for the chief, General Kelly. He ran Homeland Security and has been running the White House staff. I think, by the way, he's been a very good chief, very orderly processes in the White House. As you know, it's not an easy thing to do. General Kelly is a remarkable patriot. He has given such phenomenal service to this country. Perhaps it is time for arrest. President Trump, at our senior staff Christmas dinner Friday night, had some wonderful complimentary things to say about the chief. I heartily concur. So I suppose it's time to move on.
Well, let me ask you two more quick questions. One, did Kelly resign or was he forced out?
I don't know, to be perfectly honest. I think it was very amicable, all right? That's what I understand. You know, again, the president's saying good things about the chief. I've been in so many meetings. I mean, just so many meetings in my tenure, a little less than a year now. I think a lot of the gossip is just wrong. I think they did get along. Everybody's going to have disagreements. That's the way life works. But was he fired? I don't think he was fired. I wasn't privy to that final conversation. But the president's had great things to say about him.
What do you think of Nick Ayers?
I think quite a lot of Nick Ayers, actually. I've known him for a while. President, I guess, will let us know tomorrow or sometime early in the week who the next chief is going to be. In terms of Nick Ayers, Mike Pence's chief of staff, I think the world of him.
All right, let's turn to your day job. The stock market's had a terrible week since President Trump and President Xi had dinner in Argentina night. The Dow lost 1,100 points, or 4.5%. The S&P 500 is now in the red for 2018. Question, how much of this is because of confusion over just what the U.S. and China have agreed to?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'll grant you that, you know, trade issues, China trade issues haven't been all buttoned down yet. But look, Chris, the first couple of days after that dinner, I was down there at G20 Argentina. The markets did very well, both in China and the U.S., as a matter of fact. Since then, there have been some issues. The Huawei issue, that's a technology company that was violating Iranian sanctions, and Canada has taken them in, and they'll probably be extradited to the U.S. There have been some different statements here and there. Look, I can just tell you right now, we are on track. China has finally, I mean, Wednesday and Thursday, China's Commerce Department issued some very positive, promising statements. Sometimes I think these things get lost, maybe the beautiful funeral of former President Bush, but they said, look, they agree with the timetable, they agree with the deadlines, they expect to be moving immediately to take actions on key commodities, for example, by lowering tariffs and opening up export sales for us, things like energy, agriculture, industry, something like 35 Chinese agencies and the Supreme Court are now working on new legislation to deal with the IP theft issues and other technology issues.
Larry, the reason...
So when you piece it together, Chris, there's a lot of good things out there, and I think sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle.
Well, here's part of the reason it's got lost and why it took till Wednesday or Thursday to people find out about it, because there are big differences between how the president and the White House is describing what was agreed to and what the Chinese are saying was agreed to. And let me put a couple of them up. The U.S. says China agreed to, quote, very substantial purchases of agricultural and other products. The Chinese say nothing specific about how big those purchases will be. President Trump says the Chinese will remove their 40% tariff on U.S. auto imports. The Chinese are ducking that one. And then there's the difference between what you and White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro had to say on Friday about that 90-day deadline for a suspension of tariff increases. Take a look.
The president has indicated if there's good, solid movement and some good action, he might be willing to extend the 90 days. We'll have to see on that.
If they're not resolved in 90 days, is this administration willing to walk away?
It's not a question of walking away. It's a question of moving forward on the strategy.
That contradiction between you and Peter Navarro led to a 500-point drop in the Dow on Friday. Forget the Chinese. The White House can't seem to get its own story straight.
Well, with all respect, I don't think there's much daylight between Peter and I. We are focused right now on this first 90-day increment. Regarding what may happen in the future and presidential considerations, that'll be up to POTUS, of course, working with President Xi. I really think that's an exaggerated point. But, Chris, look, I understand people are looking for these issues. Let me just read very quickly. Here was the Chinese Commerce Department announcement. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. China will immediately implement specific issues that have been agreed upon by agriculture products, energy, and automobiles. Automobile tariffs announcement is going to come from the State Council Tariff Commission. As I said earlier, it was also announced that a number of Chinese government agencies and the Supreme Court are looking at new laws to prevent intellectual property theft. These are very strong indications. President Trump himself, I remember he called me early Thursday morning to say, did you see that announcement? Did you see that announcement? And I did, and I think it's very positive. We're making more progress now on more specific issues than. Now, let me just add quickly, trust but verify. That's very important. Ambassador Lighthizer will be looking very carefully in the course of his negotiations. He will evaluate. He will make sure there are enforcement mechanisms and timetable mechanisms. Right. That is terrible. He will evaluate. He will make sure there are enforcement mechanisms and timetable mechanisms. Right. That is terribly important. Nothing in this game is done until it is absolutely verified to our satisfaction. So that's a caveat. Okay, and I don't want to lose that. However, but having said that, the Chinese own statements are really very positive.
Okay. Well, except that, for instance, the president tweeted 40%. A tariff on auto imports is lifted. The Chinese have not committed to that. And there was a big bump in the road on Saturday night. President Xi and President Trump are sitting there having dinner together. You're at the table with them. And suddenly there's the arrest last Saturday of Meng Wanzhou, the chief financial officer of telecom giant Huawei, as you say, for allegedly violating U.S. sanctions on trade with China. Couple of quick questions. One, did President Trump know about that arrest when he sat down to dinner with President Xi? And if not, what was his reaction afterwards?
He did not know. He did not know, and he had no reaction afterward.
Well, the reports have been that he was livid, and frankly, just as an outsider, if one of the top businessmen in the other person's country was being arrested while I'm making nice at dinner, I'd be livid.
He didn't know, okay? I'll just state that unequivocally. He learned way later, by the way, way later. Look, regarding the Huawei prosecution, let me just say that's a law enforcement action. It's primarily Department of Justice. It is a very important issue because the evidence suggests, at least so far, the alleging suggests that Huawei did break the Iranian sanction through different financial channels. We will see how that plays out. That's a enforcement channel.
Can I just ask you a question about how
we're talking about it?
I just want to ask you one question about how it plays out, if I may, Larry. Republican Senator... Yeah. Marco Rubio said this week after the arrest that Huawei, a telecom giant, is a bad actor. Here is Rubio.
Knowing the history of Huawei and how it served as an instrument of Chinese espionage and influence, it's concerning. But you know, if we have a case to be made, the right thing to do is to charge her, and the right thing to do for Canada is to extradite her.
But now China is warning the U.S. and Canada, where she is being held, that there will be consequences if she continues to be held. And one of the top papers in China, the Global Times, says that her arrest amounts to a declaration of war. Can you guarantee me that as part of this negotiation, the president, the administration, will not let her go?
Chris, I can't guarantee anything. As I say, this is a DOJ, NSC law enforcement issue. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm not an attorney. It's outside my lane. So we will see. Look, the U.S. has laws about these things. The U.S. has a number of laws on the books now that protect a number of points. I mean, not only violations of sanctions, be it Iran or other countries, we have laws about anything that was stolen. We're discussing laws. People can't do business in the U.S. or sell us goods, services, intellectual property that we think was stolen. So that's just being tough and protecting the family jewels, in my judgment, and that's protecting the integrity of U.S. national security policy. Very, very important. How this affects trade, Chris, I can't sit here and be absolutely definitive. All I'll say is it seems to me there's a trade lane that we're discussing where you and I both agree the early returns from China are very positive, and it looks like we will get new actions. And there's a law enforcement lane. They're different. They're different. And I think President Trump and President Xi and lower officials will generate or continue to keep that difference. I might be wrong. I can't predict the future on this thing, but they're different channels.